I never thought a simple yard, just grass, flowers, and a small stone path leading to my front door could become the battleground of my life. But the day I saw Karen, our HOA president, drive her shiny SUV straight across my lawn, crushing the roses my late wife had planted with her own hands, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just grass she tore through. It was respect. It was respect. It was every ounce of peace I had left in this neighborhood. That moment, I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. The first time she did it, I brushed it off, telling myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she was in a rush. But when I opened my door to check, she didn't look apologetic. She didn't even glance my way. She parked right there, across my yard, stepping out in her heels like she owned the place, and strutted toward the HOA clubhouse across the street. My fists clenched, but I swallowed it down. After all, I had lived here long before she even showed up. I had built this home with my wife, raised our kids here, and buried more memories in this soil than she could ever understand. Later that evening, I walked out and looked at the flattened roses. My chest ached. Those roses weren't just flowers. They were planted the spring after my wife's chemo treatments finally ended, when she felt strong enough to dig her hands into the earth again. She smiled when the first bloom came in, said it meant hope, and now they were crushed under Karen's tires like they meant nothing. The next day, I tried to reason with her. "Karen," I said, walking up as she was locking her SUV after another meeting, "you can't park on my yard. That's my property." She looked at me with this little smirk, tilting her sunglasses down just enough to give me that condescending stare. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just grass. Besides, we're short on parking. You should be proud to contribute to the community." Proud, that word hit like poison. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt, but I forced a breath. "Those are my wife's roses you drove over? They mean something to me." Her laugh was sharp, cold. "Then don't plant them in the way of progress." She waved her hand like she was shooing a fly and walked off. Just like that. Like my wife's memory was worthless. That night, I sat on the porch for hours, staring at the crushed flower bed. Oh my, came out and sat beside me. She had her mother's eyes, soft but strong. "Dad," she said gently, "you can't let her walk all over you. Mom wouldn't want that." Tears burned my eyes. She was right. My wife always told me, "You teach people how to treat you." And here I was, letting Karen treat our home like a doormat. Something had to change. But Karen didn't stop. In fact, she seemed to double down. By the end of the week, it wasn't just her other HOA board members started pulling their cars onto my lawn too, like my yard had magically turned into free parking. One afternoon, I came home from work and found 3 cars lined across the grass, their tires sinking into the soil, mud tracks gouged deep. The roses were gone, just shredded stalks and dirt. I stood there, shaking, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. When I knocked on Karen's door that evening, she opened it like she'd been expecting me. "Look, if you're here to complain again, save it," she said, rolling her eyes. "The board has already talked about this. It's just temporary until we figure out the parking issue." Temporary. My voice cracked with anger. "You've destroyed what's mine. You didn't even ask. Do you understand what you've done?" Her eyes narrowed, her voice turning icy. "What I understand is that this community doesn't revolve around you. You're one homeowner. I run this HOA, and if a few flowers had to go for the greater good, then so be it. If you don't like it, maybe you should reconsider living here." That last line was a dagger. She wasn't just dismissing me, she was threatening me. Threatening my home, the place my wife and I had poured our lives into. I walked away, my hands trembling, but my mind made up. This wasn't going to be solved with polite conversations. That night, sat at the kitchen table with Emily. She watched me sketch. On a piece of paper, lines, angles, ideas. "What are you doing, Dad?" she asked. I looked up, meeting her worried gaze. "I'm making sure no one drives across this yard ever again." Her brows furrowed, but then a small, proud smile tugged at her lips. Mom would have liked that. Didn't sleep much that night. I could almost hear my wife's voice in the quiet, reminding me of the stubborn strength she always carried. She never backed down when something mattered. And neither would I. The next morning, I began making calls. Metal suppliers, a local welder I knew, even an old buddy who used to work in construction. Piece by piece, a plan came together. By the end of the week, I had the materials delivered. Steel beams, a locking mechanism, and most important, light attire shredding spikes. This wasn't just about keeping Karen off my lawn. This was about respect, about justice, and about sending a message that some boundaries should never, ever be crossed. As I stood in the driveway, the sun setting behind me, I looked over at the bare patch where roses once bloomed. My heart ached, but my resolve hardened. Karen thought she could roll over me like she rolled over those flowers. She had no idea who she was messing with. This was war. The first clang of steel against steel echoed through the quiet morning as I began assembling. The gate, my neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering, some curious, others cautious. I didn't care. Every bolt I tightened, every weld that sparked, felt like stitching a wound in my chest. This wasn't just metal, it was justice taking shape. Emily stood nearby, handing me tools. She didn't say much, but I caught her watching me, her face, a mixture of pride and worry. "Dad," she finally said, her voice soft, "you're really doing this, huh?" I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I have to. If I let them walk over us again, they'll never stop. Your mom always said we protect what's ours. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded. She knew I wasn't just fighting for grass or roses, was fighting for the memory of the woman who had given us this home. This life, by the third day, the tire shredding gate was nearly complete. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid, a sturdy frame with a locking mechanism that swung open for me and Emily. But when shut, the steel teeth gleamed like a warning. One wrong move, and any car would regret it instantly. That night, as I stood in the yard staring at the finished gate, I felt something I hadn't felt since my wife passed away. Peace. For once, I wasn't powerless. For once, Karen's smirk wasn't the last word. But peace in this neighborhood, lasted long. The very next day, Karen arrived in her SUV, sunglasses perched on her face, phone glued to her ear. Without hesitation, she steered directly toward my yard. My heart pounded as I watched from the porch. This was at the moment. Her front tires rolled up the curb, inching toward the gate. She slowed, confused, glaring at the metal wall that now stood between her and what she thought was hers. She honked once, twice, long and loud, drawing neighbors out of their homes. I walked down the steps slowly, deliberately. My hands didn't shake this time. "Good morning, Karen," I said evenly, stopping a few feet from her car. Her window rolled down and her voice cut like a knife. "What the hell is this?" "This," I said calmly, "is my property line. From now on, no cars cross it." Her face twisted in anger. "You can't do this. You can't just put up some medieval contraption in the middle of the community. Take it down." I shook my head. "Not happening. You've had plenty of warnings." Karen slammed her palm on the steering wheel. "Do you realize who you're dealing with? I'm the HOA president. I can fine you. I can take legal action. You don't get to just make up rules." Something inside me hardened. No, Karen, you don't get to make up rules. This is my yard, my home. And if you or anyone else drives across it again, they'll pay the price." Her eyes darted to the gate, her jaw tightening as she realized what those sharp steel teeth meant. For the first time, I saw hesitation in her eyes. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman to back down, not yet. "We'll see about that," she spat, rolling up her window. With a sharp U-turn, she sped off, tires screeching. The neighborhood buzzed for days after that. Some whispered that I'd gone too far. Others quietly, privately came up to me and said they were glad someone was finally standing up to her. Apparently, Karen's power trip wasn't limited to my yard. She'd find people for paint colors, for mailboxes, even for planting trees too tall. Everyone hated her, but no one dared to fight her until now. But I knew Karen. This wasn't over. That night, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table. She pushed her dinner around her plate, worry clouding her face. "Dad, what if she really does take legal action? What if she finds a way to push us out?" I sighed, staring at the wood grain on the table. "Then we fight back. She's not the law. She's just a woman who thinks she is." Emily leaned over, gripping my hand. "I'm proud of you. Mom would be proud too." Her words gave me strength. But in the back of my mind, I knew the storm was coming. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds and move on. She was the type to double down, to make my life hell until she got what she wanted. And sure enough, within a week, the HOA sent me a formal letter. The words were as cold and sharp as Karen's voice. Violation of HOA code. Unauthorized structures. Immediate removal required or face daily fines. I crumpled the paper in my fist, fury boiling. They wanted a war. Fine. They'd get one. I called a lawyer the next morning, an old friend of my wife's brother who specialized in property law. He came over, looked at the gate, and smiled. "You're well within your rights. It's on your land, not blocking any easement. They can bark all they want, but they don't have a legal leg to stand on." Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Because 2 nights later, caught the glint of headlights outside my window. Karen's SUV. She pulled up to the gate, her engine revving like she was daring herself to push through. My heart thundered as I stood in the dark, watching. For a second, I thought she might actually do it, slam her tires right into the spikes. But then she stopped, sat there fuming, and finally reversed. Tires screeching as she peeled away. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a yard anymore. This was about power, pride, and humiliation. And Karen was the kind of woman who'd rather burn down the whole neighborhood than lose. I sat back down, my jaw set. She thought she'd scared me with letters, threats, intimidation. But she didn't understand. She wasn't dealing with some weak old man, too sentimental to fight back. She was dealing with someone who had already lost everything once. And when you've been through that kind of pain, you don't scare easy. No, this battle had only just begun. The HOA fines started showing up like clockwork. Every morning, I'd open my mailbox to find a new envelope, bright white, stamped with the HOA logo, like little knives waiting to cut into my day. Daily fine, $250. Total load, $1,750. By the end of the first week, the number had climbed to over $2,000. I'd tear them open, my blood boiling, and Emily would watch me from across the table. "Dad," she said one morning, her voice cautious, "you don't have to go through this alone. Maybe we should just take the gate down?" Her words stung. Not because she was wrong to be afraid, but because I could see the worry carved into her young face. She was too much like her mother, always caring more about peace than pride. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Sweetheart, if we give in now, Karen wins. And if she wins, what do you think she'll do next?" She won't stop. She'll just take more. Emily lowered her eyes, fighting back tears. I just don't want to lose this house. It's all we have left of her. Her voice broke something inside me. I pulled her close, hugging her tight. That's exactly why we're not giving in. This is our home. No one is taking it from us. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the framed photo of my wife on the mantel. Her smile seemed to speak to me through the silence. You've got to fight, I whispered. I won't let her erase what we built. The next HOA meeting was held at the clubhouse, just across the street from my gate. Normally, I avoided those gatherings, but this time, I walked in, head high, heart pounding. As I stepped through the door, the room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms folded, her smirk already in place. Well, look who decided to join us, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Come to finally admit your little death trap has to go. I took a breath, my voice steady. I came to tell everyone here the truth. That gate isn't a death trap, it's protection. It's on my property, and it's my right. What's happening isn't about parking news, about Karen using this HOA to bully and control people. A murmur rippled through the room. Some board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen's smirk faltered for just a second, before she slammed her gavel on the table. Out of order. This meeting isn't about your property tantrum. I raised my voice, letting the frustration spill out. Oh, it's about a lot more than that. You find people for mailboxes, for Christmas decorations, for planting trees. You destroyed my wife's rose garden without a second thought, and you think we're all too scared to stand up to you? Well, I'm not scared anymore. Gasps spread through the room. Karen's face turned red, her lips pressed tight. You're done, she hissed. We'll take you to court, and when we do, you'll lose everything. But then, something unexpected happened. A neighbor, an older man named George who lived 2 doors down, stood up. He's right, George said firmly. You've gone too far, Karen. We've all had enough. Another voice chimed in, Mrs. Henderson, the sweet widow who lived across the street. You find me for having a bird bath. A bird bath, Karen? He's the only one brave enough to fight back. The room erupted in murmurs, people nodding, whispering, some even clapping softly. Karen pounded the gavel again, her voice shrill. Sit down, all of you. This is my meeting. But she couldn't silence them all. For the first time, the tide was turning against her. I walked out of that meeting with my head held high, knowing I wasn't alone anymore. Karen still had her threats, her letters, her fines, but she no longer had the unquestioned obedience of the neighborhood. That night, though, Emily found me sitting on the porch, my hands shaking. Dad, she whispered, kneeling beside me, you did amazing. You stood up to her. I shook my head, staring out at the gate. This isn't over, Em. When someone like Karen feels power slipping, they don't back off. They lash out harder. And I was right. 2 days later, I came home from work to find the gate vandalized. Spray paint streaked across the steel. Community terrorist. The lock was broken, bolts loosened. Someone Karen, or one of her little loyalists, had tried to sabotage it. Emily's face went pale when she saw it. Dad, this is getting dangerous. What if she comes after us? I pulled her close, heart aching at the fear in her voice. Then we fight harder. We don't back down. That night, I reinforced the gate, adding heavier locks, welding the frame tighter. But deep inside, a new fear gnawed at me. Karen wasn't just angry anymore. She was desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. The following week, I woke up to find a notice pinned to my door. Not just a fine, this time a summons. The HOA was dragging me to court, claiming my gate was a hazard and demanding its removal. Emily cried. When she read it, "Dad, what if they win? What if we lose everything?" I hugged her, swallowing my own fear. "Then we make sure they don't." The battle lines were drawn. The courtroom would decide who had the right to this land, this home, this memory of my wife. But I already knew this wasn't just about property. This was about dignity, about family, about standing up to a bully who thought she could crush us like she crushed those roses. As I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out before me, I whispered to the photo of my wife once more, "This fights for you." And I swore to myself, Karen had started a war. But I was going to finish it. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, adding to the tension that pressed down on my chest. Emily walked beside me, her hand gripping mine like she was still 10 years old instead of a grown woman. Her palm was damp with nerves, and mine wasn't much better. This wasn't just a hearing, it felt like Judgment Day. Karen was already there, sitting smugly at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer. A sharp-looking man in an expensive suit who seemed to radiate arrogance. She wore her usual oversized sunglasses, even indoors, like she was too important to be seen under normal light. When she caught sight of me, she gave a little wave, almost playful, as if this was some game and she had already won. I ignored her and took my seat with my own lawyer and older gentleman named Frank, who'd been in the business for decades. He wasn't flashy, but there was a steadiness about him that calmed me. Like an anchor in stormy seas, when the judge entered, the room hushed. Karen's lawyer stood first, painting me as a reckless homeowner who had built a dangerous, unapproved structure that threatened community safety. He called the gate malicious and even suggested I had created it out of spite to intimidate the HOA. Karen nodded along dramatically, shaking her head as though she were the victim of some terrible injustice. At one point, she even dabbed at her eye with a tissue, fake tears that didn't fool anyone who knew her. When it was our turn, Frank stood, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, this isn't about community safety. This is about a woman who has abused her position in an HOA to harass, intimidate, and destroy the property of my client. The gate in question sits entirely within his property line. It does not block traffic. It does not create danger. It exists solely to protect his home from repeated trespassing and damage." He glanced at me, and I felt my chest swell. For the first time in months, someone was speaking for me, not against me. Then Frank did something I'll never forget. He handed the judge a photo of my yard before the roses were destroyed. A picture Emily had taken years ago of her mom kneeling in the garden, smiling proudly beside those blooms. The judge studied it for a long moment before looking back at me. Double quotes, "Mr. Thompson." The judge asked, his tone softer than I expected, "Is this accurate?" Those flowers were there before the HOA began parking. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Yes, Your Honor. My wife planted them. She's gone now. They were important to us." A silence spread through the courtroom. Even Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, though the mask of arrogance never fully left her face. The judge leaned back, sighing. "I see no violation. Here, the gate is lawful. The HOA cannot enforce removal, nor can they fine you further." My knees nearly buckled in relief. Emily gripped my arm, whispering, "We won, Dad. We actually won." Karen shot up from her chair, her sunglasses clattering to the floor. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "He's turning this neighborhood into a fortress. He's dangerous." The judge slammed his gavel. "Enough. The court's decision is final. Case dismissed." Karen's lawyer tried to calm her, but she stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. The sound was sharp, bitter, like the cry of a wounded animal. For the first time, it wasn't me who felt defeated. That evening, the neighborhood buzzed with the news. Neighbors I barely spoke to came by, congratulating me, shaking my hand. George brought over a bottle of whiskey. Mrs. Henderson baked Emily a pie. People who'd been silent for years now whispered their own stories of how Karen had bullied them. How they wished they'd stood up sooner. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this was the end. Maybe Karen would finally back off, knowing that law wasn't on her side, but peace never lasted long with her. The next morning, I stepped outside to find my car keyed from front to back. Deep, jagged scratches that cut through the paint like scars. A note was tucked under the windshield wiper, written in big, messy letters. "This isn't over." Emily's voice cracked when she saw it. "Dad, she's losing it. What if she tries something worse?" I clenched the note in my fist, my heart hammering. The victory in court had humiliated her, stripped away her control. And humiliation breeds rage. That night, sleep refused to come. I sat by the window, watching the gate in the dark, waiting, listening for the sound of her SUV or the crunch of footsteps in the grass. My mind kept flashing back to my wife's smile in that garden, to the roses now long gone. Rage simmered, mixing with exhaustion until my hands trembled by 3 a.m. I realized something. Winning in court wasn't enough. Karen wouldn't stop until she was forced to stop, till every card she thought she held was ripped from her manicured hands. This wasn't just about protecting my yard anymore. It was about ending her reign of terror over everyone in this neighborhood. And I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the attack. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes when you know a storm is about to break. Karen had crossed a line with that note. Scratching my car was more than vandalism, it was a declaration. She wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. She wanted me broken, humiliated, begging her for mercy. But she'd picked the wrong man. For that, I spent the day making calls, digging into every connection I had left. Friends from work, old buddies from the county offices, even a retired cop I knew who lived in the next town over. If Karen thought she could keep her power by hiding behind HOA rules, she was about to learn what real accountability looked like. That evening, Emily walked in and saw the papers spread across the kitchen table: documents, notes, printed emails I'd managed to get from neighbors. "Dad," she said carefully, "what is all this?" I looked up at her, my jaw set. "It's evidence. Karen's been abusing her position for years. Fines, threats, even skimming money from HOA funds. People have been too scared to speak up, but I'm not scared anymore. If she wants a war, we'll give her one." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean you're going after her?" "Not just for us," I said. "For everyone she's hurt." For the first time in weeks, a small spark of hope lit in Emily's eyes. "Mom would be proud of you," she whispered. The days that followed turned into a whirlwind. One by one, neighbors came to me, some timid, some desperate, each with their own story. George had records of special fees Karen forced him to pay for repairs that were never done. Mrs. Henderson showed me letters Karen had written, threatening to foreclose on her house over a bird bath. Another neighbor revealed that Karen's husband had once been caught using HOA funds to pay for personal landscaping work. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was a thief. One night, as Emily and I organized the evidence into folders, she looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. "What if she finds out what we're doing?" I paused, staring at the stacks of paper. "Then she'll know her time is running out." Sure enough, Karen sensed something was shifting. She started showing up outside our house again, her SUV idling by the curb, headlights casting long, menacing beams across the yard. Sometimes she'd sit there for 10 minutes, sometimes longer, just watching. Emily refused to go outside after dark, and I couldn't blame her. But I didn't flinch. Every time she tried to intimidate me, I'd walk right out onto the porch, stand tall, and stare her down until she finally drove away. If she wanted to scare me, she'd have to do better than that. Finally, the moment came. Armed with the evidence, I contacted a state investigator. When I handed him the files, his eyes widened. "This is serious," he said. "If what you're showing me is true, she's been embezzling funds and committing fraud for years. We'll need to build a solid case, but you may have just blown this wide open." Relief surged through me, but it was tempered with fear. Karen wasn't going to take this lying down, and she proved that the very next day, when I pulled into the driveway after work. I found the gate forced open, the lock cut clean through. The spikes were bent, tools scattered nearby. She'd tried to dismantle it. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Emily came running out, her face pale. "Dad, someone broke it." I pulled her close, my heart hammering with both fury and dread. "It's her. She knows." That night, I barely slept, pacing the living room with a baseball bat in hand, listening for any sound outside. My wife's photo on the mantel seemed to watch me, her eyes filled with a strength I desperately needed. "This ends soon," I whispered. "I promise." And then, 2 weeks later, it happened. Karen arrived at the HOA clubhouse for a meeting, strutting in like always. But she didn't know what awaited her inside. State investigators, clipboards in hand, waiting with the evidence I had provided. As neighbors gathered, whispers filled the air. I stood at the back of the room with Emily by my side as the lead investigator approached her. "Karen Roberts, we need to speak with you about allegations of financial misconduct." Her face went pale. "What? This is ridiculous. Who told you that?" The investigator held up the folder of documents. "We have proof of funds being misused, fraudulent fines, and coercion. You'll need to come with us." The room erupted. Neighbors gasped. Some even cheered quietly. Karen sputtered, her words breaking apart. "This is a setup. You're all against me." But the investigators didn't care. They escorted her out, her heels clicking furiously against the floor as she shrieked about conspiracies and betrayal. For the first time, the neighborhood saw her stripped of power, her mask shattered. She wasn't untouchable anymore as I stood. There, Emily gripped my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "You did it, Dad. You actually did it." But even as relief washed over me, I knew one thing for certain. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. She'd fight tooth and nail, even if it meant dragging everyone down with her. And I wasn't done yet. Because while she had been exposed, the real revenge, the justice she'd never forget, was still to come. The night after Karen was escorted out of the clubhouse, the neighborhood felt different. The air was lighter. Conversations flowed freely on porches. And for the first time in years, people laughed without fear of who might overhear. Emily and I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, listening to the sound of kids playing in the street. "You see that?" I whispered to her. "That's what freedom looks like." She smiled, but her eyes still carried worry. "Dad, you know she's not going to just disappear, right?" I nodded. I knew Karen wasn't built to accept defeat. She'd claw her way back, try to twist the story, maybe even spin herself as the victim. And sure enough, within days, rumors started swirling. She was telling anyone who'd listen that the charges were exaggerated, that the community had turned on her unfairly, that I'd masterminded some vendetta. But her words carried less weight now. People had seen too much, and the investigators weren't done. One evening, Frank, the lawyer who had helped me through court, came by with an update. "They're preparing formal charges," he said, his tone serious. "Fraud, embezzlement, misuse of HOA funds. She could be looking at years, not months. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest loosening just a little. Good. It's about time. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't just waiting quietly for trial. She was plotting. That suspicion turned into certainty a week later. Emily and I came home from the grocery store to find the front door slightly ajar. My heart sank. I told her to wait in the car, then stepped inside slowly. Gripping the baseball bat I kept by the door. The house was a mess, drawers pulled open, papers scattered, the photo of my wife knocked face down on the floor. My blood ran cold. Someone had been looking for something. On the kitchen table was a note. Scrawled in rushed handwriting, "You think you've won. This isn't over." Emily's voice cracked behind me. "Dad," it was her. I pulled her into my arms, rage and fear churning together. Karen had invaded the one place that still felt sacred. She hadn't just crossed a line, she'd obliterated it. That night, I called the investigators, told them everything. They promised to add it to their case, but I knew better. Karen was desperate now. Desperate people didn't wait for trials. They acted, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting to see what she'd do next. Over the next few days, I doubled down. Reinforced the locks, installed cameras, even set up motion-activated lights around the yard. Emily protested at first, but when she saw the determination in my eyes, she simply nodded. "This house is our line in the sand," I told her. "She doesn't get to scare us out of it." But even with all the precautions, sleep was nearly impossible. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees outside had me on edge. Sometimes I'd wake up to headlights idling outside, only for them to vanish when I opened the blinds. Then came the breaking point. It was a Friday night, and Emily had gone to bed early. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the roar of an engine outside, loud and angry. I rushed to the window just in time to see Karen's SUV barreling toward the gate. My heart slammed against my ribs. She was going to do it. She was going to ram through. I bolted to the porch, yelling, "Stop!" But she didn't. The SUV hit the gate with a sickening crash, metal shrieking, tires spinning as the spikes shredded rubber. The vehicle lurched forward, then halted with a hiss of steam and smoke. Neighbors poured out of their homes, gasping, shouting. Emily came running to the door, her eyes wide with terror. Karen stumbled out of the driver's side, her face twisted with fury, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You ruined my life," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This is all your fault. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're nothing. Nothing." The sight of her, broken and unhinged, might have scared me once. But not now. Not after everything. I stood tall, my voice steady. "No, Karen, you did this to yourself. Every lie, every threat, every cruel thing you did, you brought this on." The flashing red and blue lights arrived minutes later. Police swarmed the scene, pulling her away as she kicked and screamed, shouting curses at me and Emily, at the neighbors, at the world, as they shoved her into the back of the cruiser. I locked eyes with her one last time. And for the first time, I saw it not arrogance, not power, not control, just fear. The neighborhood stood in stunned silence as the cars drove off. Leaving the wreck of her SUV at the shattered gate, Emily slipped her hand into mine. "It's over now, Dad," she whispered. I looked at the wreckage, the steel teeth, glinting in the moonlight, and shook my head slowly. Almost, but not yet. Because I knew Karen's arrest was only the beginning. The trial would come, and with it, the final chapter of this war. And when that day arrived, she'd face the full weight of everything she'd done, not just to me, but to all of us. The first time Karen's tires screamed against the metal teeth of my hidden gate, it was like the soundtrack of justice finally playing. The sharp snap, followed by the hiss of air rushing out, was something I never thought I'd enjoy so much. My wife came running out onto the porch, startled by the sound, while I leaned against the railing, arms folded, watching Karen's silver SUV tilt awkwardly to one side as the shredded rubber flapped against the pavement. Her face, in that moment's shock, melting into outrage, was burned into my memory forever. For once, I didn't feel small, cornered, or powerless. For once, she was the one caught in a trap. But the fallout didn't stop there. Karen stormed up to my porch, heels clicking furiously against the walkway, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You'll pay for this," she shrieked. "You think you can just do this to me? To my car?" Her voice cracked with both fury and fear. Behind her, neighbors began peeking out at their windows, some even coming outside. Whispers spread like wildfire. Karen wasn't just embarrassed, she was exposed. For years, she had been the HOA's queen bee, untouchable and smug. Now she was standing on my porch, humiliated, surrounded by witnesses who had secretly been waiting for someone to bring her down. I didn't say a word at first. I let her rant, let her voice carry across the street so everyone could hear her tantrum. Then, when the silence finally stretched, I leaned forward and said quietly, "You cut through my yard, Karen. You disrespected my family. That gate was put up to protect what's mine. If you don't like it, maybe you should learn to use the road like everyone else." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked around, realizing that no one was coming to her defense. The neighbors weren't nodding in agreement with her anymore, they were nodding with me. One of them, an older man named Frank, who had lived here longer than anyone, muttered loudly enough for us all to hear, "'Bout time someone taught her a lesson." The tension broke like a wave. Karen's control had snapped, her throne crumbled. Right there in the street. Still, she wasn't going down without a fight. The very next day, she rallied the HOA board, demanding an emergency meeting. She tried to twist the story, painting herself as the victim. He installed a dangerous contraption. She shouted, her finger stabbing the air in my direction. "He nearly killed me. He's a menace to this neighborhood." Her words were sharp, but the fear behind them was obvious. For the first time, she was scrambling, her confidence fractured. I sat in that meeting calmly, a folder of evidence in my lap. Photos of her car parked halfway through my lawn, copies of complaints she had ignored, and testimonies from neighbors who had watched her do the same thing for months. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I laid everything on the table, literally, and let the evidence speak louder than any of her accusations. By the time I was done, the room was buzzing. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them, who had always been Karen's allies, couldn't even look at her. The HOA president cleared his throat and finally said what everyone was thinking. "Karen, it seems clear that you've been abusing your position. This behavior is unacceptable." Her face went pale. She tried to fight back, tried to claw her way out with more lies, but it was useless. The more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. Finally, the board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. The queen had fallen, dethroned in front of everyone. But for me, the real victory wasn't just that she lost her power. It was what came after. Without Karen's iron grip on the HOA, the neighborhood began to heal. People who had been divided started coming together, sharing laughs and helping one another like neighbors should. My wife and I finally felt peace. On our porch, watching our kids play in the yard without fear of someone storming through it. The gate stayed up, not just as protection, but as a reminder, boundaries matter. As for Karen, she never recovered. Her shredded SUV sat in her driveway for weeks, a silent monument to her downfall. Neighbors whispered about her, not with respect anymore, but with pity and disdain. She avoided eye contact, stopped attending gatherings, And eventually, the for sale sign appeared in her yard. The woman who once terrorized us all was leaving, tail between her legs. Her reign of control shattered. On the day the moving trucks pulled away, I stood by my gate, arms folded once again. Karen glanced at me from her car window, her eyes full of venom, but also something else, fear. She knew she had been beaten, not just by me, but by the truth. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not out of anger, but out of relief. Justice didn't come in the form of revenge. Alone it came in the form of peace, of community finally free from one person's poison. My yard was safe, my family was safe, and the neighborhood was alive again. And every time I heard the faint metallic click of that gate closing behind me, I knew one thing for certain: Karen would never cut through my life again.